The world doesn't reward fairness. It rewards those who understand the invisible game being played beneath every conversation, every smile, every handshake. You can be the most honest person in the room, and someone will still lie to your face. You can be the hardest worker, and someone lazier will still get promoted. You could be loyal to the bone, and someone will betray you without blinking. That's not pessimism. That's reality, and the moment you accept this, you stop being a victim of it. Here's what separates the powerful from the powerless. Those who survive aren't the nicest. They're not the most talented. They're not even the smartest in the traditional sense. Those who survive understand human nature at a level most people refuse to acknowledge. They see the patterns. They recognize the games, and they play them better than everyone else. Those who survive don't just exist, they rule. What you're about to learn isn't taught in schools. It's not found in self-help books that tell you to think positive and manifest your dreams. This is dark intelligence, the kind of intelligence that watches while others talk, the kind that listens to what people don't say, the kind that understands timing, knows when to strike, and more importantly, knows when to stay silent. Dark intelligence doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need validation. It simply wins. And it wins because it operates on laws that most people are completely blind to. Now, before we go any further, let me be crystal clear about something. This knowledge isn't about becoming a manipulator. It's about becoming unmanipulatable. There's a massive difference. One destroys relationships and leaves you isolated. The other protects you, strengthens you, and gives you the ability to navigate a world that's already playing games, whether you acknowledge it or not. You're learning these laws for self-defense, for awareness, for power over your own life, not to hurt others. Not to scheme for the sake of scheming, but to never be played again. By the end of this, you'll understand 8 laws that geniuses have used throughout history to outsmart everyone around them. These aren't theories. These are principles pulled directly from Niccolo Machiavelli's work, refined through centuries of application, and proven by those who shaped nations, built empires, and controlled outcomes, while others wondered how they did it. You'll see why some people always seem 10 steps ahead. Why certain individuals command respect without demanding it. Why power flows towards specific people like gravity. Drop this affirmation in the comments right now, because saying it out loud starts the shift. I see the game, and I will not be played. Write it. Own it. Let that be your declaration. Now let's unlock the secrets that most people will never understand. Strategic absence is the art of withdrawing at the moment when your value peaks. It's the deliberate choice to step back, to vanish, to make yourself scarce, exactly when people expect you to be most present. You're not disappearing because you're weak. You're disappearing because you understand a fundamental truth about human psychology. We only crave what we can't easily access. When you're always available, always responding, always there, you become like air. Essential, but invisible. Nobody appreciates air until it's gone. Machiavelli once said, "Men nearly always follow the tracks made by others and proceed in their affairs by imitation, though they cannot entirely keep to the tracks of others or emulate the prowess of their models." A prudent man should always follow in the footsteps of great men and imitate those who have been outstanding. Here's what happens in most relationships, professional or personal. You give your time freely. Someone texts you, you respond within minutes. Someone needs help, you drop everything. Someone wants your attention, you provide it instantly. And what happens? They start expecting it. Your availability becomes the baseline. Then one day you're busy, you don't respond immediately, and suddenly you're the problem. They're annoyed. They're questioning your loyalty. They're upset because you violated the pattern you created. You trained them to devalue you. Now think about the most intriguing people you know, the ones everyone wants to be around. Notice something. They're never desperate for connection. They don't return every call immediately. They don't say yes to every invitation. When they show up, it feels like an event. When they give you their time, it feels like a gift. That's not accidental. That's strategic absence in action. They've created scarcity around their presence, and scarcity always increases value. This is pure power dynamics and psychological influence. The moment you make yourself scarce, people's subconscious programming kicks in. They start asking questions. Where are you? What are you doing? Why aren't you as available? And those questions turn into obsession. Most people operate from fear. They're afraid if they're not constantly visible, they'll be forgotten. So they over-communicate, they over-explain. They stay in situations longer than necessary because leaving feels like losing. But here's what smart people understand. Staying too long dilutes your impact. There's a moment in every interaction, every project, every relationship, where your value is at its absolute peak. Right before that peak tips into familiarity. Right before people start taking you for granted, that's when you leave. Not forever, not cruelly, but intentionally. Let me give you a concrete scenario. You're working on a team project. You've been contributing heavily, showing up to every meeting, responding to every message thread. Your ideas are good. People are starting to rely on you. Most people would keep that pattern going, thinking it builds their reputation. Instead, you could strategically pull back. Miss one meeting with a brief excuse. Go quiet in the group chat for a day. When you return, watch what happens. Suddenly, people are checking on you. Your opinion carries more weight. Your contributions are noticed more because they're not constant background noise. Notice the difference. You didn't work harder. You worked smarter by understanding absence. This principle extends into every corner of your life. In dating, the person who's always available becomes the backup option. In business, the consultant who's always free seems less valuable than the one who's booked solid. In friendships, the person who drops everything every time becomes the emotional dumping ground. Strategic absence protects you from being exploited while simultaneously increasing your perceived value. It's shadow work in practice because you're confronting the uncomfortable truth that your presence alone isn't enough. You have to manage how and when you deliver it. The key principle here is this. Absence must be strategic, not random. If you disappear without pattern or reason, you just seem flaky. But if you're selectively unavailable, if you create intentional gaps in your accessibility, you're training people to appreciate you more. What happens when you master this? People start chasing you. They initiate more. They value your time more. They treat your presence like the rare commodity it should be. You shift from being chosen to being the chooser. That's the transfer of power. But never absent yourself so much that you lose yourself. This doesn't mean becoming cold or unavailable to the point of destroying relationships. It means understanding that your presence is valuable, and valuable things aren't given freely to everyone all the time. Use this law to reclaim your power from situations where you've been overgiving. Use it to create space for yourself. Use it to make people realize what they had while they still have access to it. Remember, the goal isn't to play games for the sake of playing games. The goal is to stop being taken for granted. When you understand strategic absence, you understand that sometimes the most powerful move is the one where you make no move at all. Calculated opacity means you're never fully transparent about your intentions, plans, or next moves. You show people exactly what they need to see and nothing more. You're not lying, you're not deceiving. You're simply choosing not to reveal the full picture. Most people think honesty means total transparency. They confuse being genuine with being an open book. But here's the truth. When everyone can read you, everyone can predict you. And when you're predictable, you're controllable. Machiavelli once said, "Everyone sees what you appear to be, few experience what you really are." Here's what happens in most conversations. Someone asks about your plans. Maybe it's a coworker asking about your career goals. Maybe it's a friend asking about a business idea you're developing. Maybe it's a family member asking about a relationship, and most people just spill everything. They explain their entire strategy. They share their doubts. They reveal their timeline. They think this is being authentic. But what they're actually doing is giving away their power. Because now everyone knows exactly where you're vulnerable, exactly what you're planning, exactly how to interfere or compete or judge. Let's say someone at work asks what you're working on this week. The average person gives a detailed breakdown of every task, every meeting, every concern. They think this makes them look busy and important. Instead, you could say something vague but true, focusing on a few key priorities, keeping things moving forward. Notice what just happened. You answered the question without revealing anything useful. You stayed polite, you stayed professional, but you kept your cards hidden. That's calculated opacity. They can't undermine what they don't fully understand. Think about the most powerful people you've encountered. Business leaders, strategic thinkers, people who consistently win. Notice how they speak. They're masters of saying a lot without saying much. They answer questions without really answering them. They smile and nod while revealing nothing substantial. It's not that they're being dishonest. They're being strategic. They understand that information is leverage, and once you give it away, you can't take it back. This is deep thinking and overcoming cognitive bias at its core. Most people have a cognitive bias toward oversharing because they believe transparency builds trust. But what actually builds trust is consistency and results, not verbal diarrhea about your every thought. The deeper application of this law touches on identity and personal transformation. When you're constantly explaining yourself, justifying your choices, revealing your reasoning, you're actually seeking external validation. You want people to understand you, so they'll approve of you. But that need for understanding makes you weak. It makes you dependent on others' opinions. Calculated opacity forces you to become comfortable with being misunderstood. And that's where real power lives. When you no longer need everyone to get you, when you're fine with mysteries surrounding your intentions, you freed yourself from the most exhausting prison, the need for approval. Here's a professional example. You're interviewing for a position, and they ask about your salary expectations. The amateur reveals their exact number, or worse, reveals their current salary. They think honesty will be rewarded. Instead, you could say, "I'm looking for a compensation package that reflects the value I bring and aligns with market rates for this role. I'm confident we can find something that works for both sides once we've discussed the full scope." You didn't dodge the question. You just didn't give them the ammunition to lowball you. You stayed opaque. That's the psychology behind decision-making. You made a strategic choice to protect your interests while maintaining the relationship. This doesn't mean become a vault that never opens. It means you selectively share based on who deserves access to your inner world. Close friends, trusted mentors, people who've proven themselves. They get more transparency. Everyone else gets the curated version, the version that protects you while still allowing connection. What happens when you master this? People stop assuming they know you. They stop trying to predict your moves. They start respecting the boundary you've created between your public self and your private strategy. But here's the warning. Never be so opaque that you seem dishonest or shady. There's a difference between strategic mystery and sketchy behavior. Strategic mystery intrigues. Sketchy behavior repels. You want people curious, not suspicious. The balance is answering questions in ways that satisfy social norms without revealing strategic information. You want to seem open while actually being closed. That's the art of calculated opacity. The key principle here is control. When you control information flow, you control perception. When you control perception, you control outcomes. This is subconscious programming at work. You're reprogramming yourself to stop seeking validation through explanation. You're rewiring your mind for clarity and growth by accepting that not everyone needs to understand your journey. And in doing so, you become untouchable. Remember, the goal isn't to be mysterious for the sake of being mysterious. The goal is to protect your strategy from interference, your plans from sabotage, and your peace from people who don't need to know everything about you. Emotional detachment is the ability to separate your feelings from your decisions. It's the practice of observing your emotions without being controlled by them. You feel anger, but you don't act from anger. You feel fear, but you don't let fear make your choices. You feel desire, but you don't let desire blind you to reality. This isn't about becoming robotic or cold. This is about becoming powerful. Because the moment your emotions dictate your behavior, you've handed control of your life to whoever knows how to trigger those emotions. Machiavelli once said, "The lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. One must therefore be a fox to recognize traps and a lion to frighten wolves." Here's what happens to most people. Someone disrespects them, and they immediately react. Someone triggers their insecurity, and they lash out. Someone offers them something they want, and they jump without thinking. Their emotions are like puppet strings, and the world is full of puppeteers. Every reaction is predictable. Every trigger is known, and predictable people are easily manipulated. This is the core of power dynamics and psychological influence. Those who control their emotions control the interaction. Those who react emotionally are being controlled. Think about an argument you've had recently. Maybe with a partner, a colleague, a family member. In the heat of the moment, emotions took over. You said things you didn't mean. You made decisions you later regretted. Your voice raised. Your logic disappeared. And afterward, you probably thought, "Why did I react like that?" That's the cost of emotional reactivity. It makes you do things that your rational mind would never approve. Now imagine if, in that same situation, you had paused, taken a breath, felt the anger rising but didn't act from it. Responded calmly, strategically, with the outcome in mind rather than the feeling. Everything changes. Let's apply this to a common scenario. Someone at work takes credit for your idea in a meeting. Your immediate emotional response is rage. You want to call them out right there, embarrass them, reclaim what's yours. Most people would do exactly that. They'd let the emotion drive them into a confrontation that might feel good for 5 seconds, but damages their reputation for months. Instead, you could sit with that anger. Acknowledge it internally. Then make a calculated decision about how to handle it. Maybe you privately document everything. Maybe you subtly correct the record in a follow-up email. Maybe you use it as information about this person's character and adjust your strategy around them. Notice the difference. The emotional reaction gives you temporary satisfaction, but long-term problems. The detached response gives you control and strategic advantage. This law goes deep into shadow work and subconscious programming. Most of your emotional reactions aren't even about the present moment. They're old wounds being triggered. That co-worker taking credit for your idea. It's not just about the idea. It's about every time you felt invisible as a child, every time you were overlooked, every time someone got credit you deserved. Your subconscious is running ancient programming, and until you do the shadow work to understand those triggers, you'll keep reacting instead of responding. Emotional detachment requires you to examine why certain things set you off. What is this really about? Once you understand your triggers, you can disarm them. The deeper application is about decision-making. Think about major life choices, career changes, relationship decisions, financial investments. How often are those choices driven by emotion rather than logic? You stay in a bad job because you're afraid of change. You stay in a toxic relationship because you're attached to the potential, not the reality. You make an impulsive purchase because you felt empty and wanted to fill the void. These are all examples of emotions overriding your better judgment. When you practice detachment, you create space between stimulus and response. Something happens. You feel an emotion, but you don't immediately act on it. You let the feeling exist without letting it decide for you. Here's what mastering this looks like in real life. Someone insults you. Instead of defending yourself immediately, you pause. You assess whether this person's opinion even matters. You decide if a response serves you or just feeds their drama. You might respond calmly, or you might say nothing at all. But it's a choice, not a reaction. Someone offers you an opportunity that sounds amazing. Instead of jumping because it feels exciting, you pause. You examine the details. You look for red flags. You make a strategic decision based on facts, not feelings. This is rewiring your mind for clarity and growth. You're training yourself to think before you feel, or at least to think while you're feeling. The contrast is everywhere. Most people are emotional volcanoes, constantly erupting. They're exhausting to be around because everything is a crisis, everything is urgent, everything requires an immediate emotional response. But the powerful, the strategic, the ones who actually win, they're calm, they observe, they feel deeply but express selectively. They've learned that emotions are data, not directives. Anger tells you a boundary was crossed. Fear tells you to assess risk. Desire tells you what you value. But none of those emotions should make your decisions for you. What happens when you master emotional detachment? You become unpredictable in the best way. People can't manipulate you through anger because you don't take the bait. They can't control you through fear because you've assessed the threat rationally. They can't tempt you into bad decisions because you've evaluated the offer objectively. You become dangerous because you're not playing the emotional game everyone else is playing. You're playing chess while they're playing checkers with their feelings, but never detach so much that you lose your humanity. This doesn't mean becoming cold, uncaring, or emotionally unavailable in your close relationships. It means understanding that emotions are powerful tools when you control them, and dangerous weapons when they control you. Use this law to protect yourself from impulsive decisions. Use it to stay calm in chaos. Use it to think clearly when everyone around you is losing their minds. Remember, the goal isn't to stop feeling. The goal is to stop feeling from making your decisions. When you feel everything but react to nothing, you mastered the law of emotional detachment. Perceived effortlessness is the art of making your victories look easy. It's about hiding the struggle, the late nights, the failures, the grinding work behind a mask of natural talent and casual success. People are drawn to those who make excellence look effortless. They admire the athlete who scores without breaking a sweat, the entrepreneur who builds empires while posting vacation photos, the artist whose work seems to flow from their fingertips. What they don't see is the suffering behind the performance. And that's exactly the point. Machiavelli once said, "Never attempt to win by force what can be won by deception." Here's what happens to most people. They work incredibly hard on something, and then they can't help but tell everyone exactly how hard it was. They need the recognition for their effort. They want credit for the hours invested, so they talk about the sleepless nights, the stress, the challenges they overcame. They think this makes them look dedicated and hard-working, but what it actually does is diminish their accomplishment. It makes their success look like luck or maximum effort rather than skill. It removes the mystique. And mystique is power. Think about the most impressive people you've observed. The ones who seem to have it all figured out. Notice how they present their achievements. They casually mention landing a major deal. They offhandedly reference completing a difficult project. They share their wins without the sob story of how they got there. This isn't dishonesty. This is strategic presentation. They understand that people respect natural talent more than visible struggle. It's unfair, it's irrational, but it's human nature. This is truth and identity at work. The truth is, you worked extremely hard. But your identity to the outside world is someone for whom success comes naturally. Those are two different things, and smart people keep them separate. Let's apply this to a real scenario. You spent 3 months developing a proposal for a client. You researched endlessly, rewrote it 17 times, stressed over every detail. Most people, when presenting this proposal, would mention that effort. I really put a lot of time into this. This took me months to get right. They think it shows dedication. Instead, you could present it confidently, as if this level of excellence is just what you do. Here's the proposal. I think you'll find it addresses everything we discussed. No mention of the struggle. No plea for sympathy. Just competence displayed casually. That's the psychology behind decision-making and presentation. You've decided to let the work speak for itself rather than narrating your effort. The deeper layer of this law touches on cognitive bias and how people process competence. There's a bias in human psychology called the halo effect. When someone appears naturally gifted, we assume they're talented in other areas too. When someone appears to struggle, we assume they're reaching their limits. So by presenting your wins as effortless, you're actually triggering a cognitive bias that makes people overestimate your abilities across the board. This compounds your power. One easy victory makes them think every victory will be easy for you. That perception alone intimidates competition and attracts opportunity. Here's what this looks like in personal transformation and growth. You're working on yourself. Maybe you're reading, learning new skills, going to therapy, doing the shadow work. That's hard. That's uncomfortable. Most people broadcast this journey constantly. They post about their therapy sessions. They share every insight. They document every step of their growth. Again, they think this is authenticity. But what it actually does is make people see you as a work in progress rather than someone who's arrived. Instead, you could do all that growth work privately. Let people notice the results without knowing the process. They see you more confident, more capable, more centered. But they don't know about the months of internal work. They just think that's who you are. That perception is more powerful than the reality. Most people want to be understood. They want credit for their effort. They want recognition for their struggle. But that need for external validation makes them weak. It makes their success contingent on others acknowledging their effort. When you embrace perceived effortlessness, you free yourself from that need. You're working for the outcome, not the applause for how hard you worked. This is rewiring your mind for clarity and growth. You're reprogramming yourself to detach your self-worth from visible effort and attach it to results. The contrast is stark. The person who makes everything look hard comes across as maxed out, barely keeping up, always on the edge of failure. The person who makes everything look easy comes across as operating at half capacity, with endless reserves of capability. Even if they're working equally hard behind the scenes, the perception creates different realities. One gets passed over because they seem overwhelmed. The other gets promoted because they seem ready for more. What happens when you master this? People start assuming you're more talented than you are. They attribute your success to natural gifts rather than hard work. And while that might feel unfair, it serves you strategically. It means competitors underestimate the effort required to beat you. It means employers think you can handle more responsibility. It means people want to be around you because you're not constantly broadcasting your struggle and exhausting them with your process. But here's the critical balance. Never fake competence you don't have. This law is about hiding effort, not fabricating ability. If you can't deliver, all the effortless posturing in the world won't save you. This is about doing the hard work privately and presenting the results publicly. It's about sweating in the gym but looking fresh in the photos. It's about bleeding behind the curtain but bowing gracefully on stage. The key principle is this. People respect what appears natural more than what appears forced. When you make excellence look easy, you make yourself look exceptional. When you make struggle look obvious, you make yourself look ordinary. Choose which image serves your goals, remember? The goal isn't to lie about your journey. The goal is to understand that your struggle is yours, your process is yours, and the world only needs to see your results. When you let your work speak louder than your effort, you've mastered the law of perceived effortlessness. Controlled generosity is the practice of giving strategically rather than emotionally. It's about understanding that every act of kindness, every favor, every gift should serve a purpose beyond just making you feel good. This isn't about being heartless. This is about being smart. Because when you give without strategy, you attract users, create entitlement, and drain yourself without building genuine loyalty. But when you give strategically, you build alliances, create obligation, and establish yourself as someone whose help is valuable, precisely because it's not freely distributed to everyone. Machiavelli once said, "Benefits should be conferred gradually, and in that way they will taste better." Here's what happens to most people. They have a generous heart, and they think that's enough. Someone asks for help, they give it. Someone needs money, they lend it. Someone wants their time, they provide it. They give and give and give, expecting that kindness will be returned, that people will appreciate them, that generosity will build real relationships. But what actually happens? People take advantage. They start expecting your help. They feel entitled to your resources. And the moment you set a boundary, the moment you say no, you're suddenly the bad guy. You created that dynamic by teaching people your generosity has no limits. Think about the relationships where you feel most drained. The friend who only calls when they need something. The family member who always needs money. The co-worker who constantly asks for favors but never reciprocates. How did they get that way? They got that way because somewhere along the line you taught them that your generosity was unconditional. You never made them earn it. You never made them reciprocate. You just gave. And human nature being what it is, they learn to take. This is power dynamics and psychological influence at its rawest. When you give freely, you lose power. When you give selectively, you gain it. Let's apply this to a concrete scenario. A colleague asked you to help them with a project that's not your responsibility. The immediate instinct for generous people is to say yes. They want to be helpful. They want to be liked. They say yes without thinking. Instead, you could pause and ask yourself, what do I gain from this? Is this person someone who helps me when I need it? Is this building a reciprocal relationship, or am I being used? Maybe you help, but you make it clear it's a favor, not an obligation. I can help you with this, but I've got my own deadlines, so it'll have to be quick. Or maybe you say no gracefully. I'd love to help, but I'm completely swamped right now. Maybe next time. Notice the difference? You're controlling when and how you give, not just reflexively giving because you were asked. The deeper layer here connects to subconscious programming and self-worth. Many people overgive because they're trying to prove their value. They think if they're useful enough, helpful enough, generous enough, people will love them. But that's a scarcity mindset. It's programming from childhood, where maybe love was conditional on performance. Shadow work forces you to examine this. Why do you feel compelled to give? Are you giving from abundance or from a need to be needed? When you give strategically, you're operating from abundance. You're choosing to help because it serves your goals, not because you need validation. Here's what this looks like in personal relationships. You have a friend who's always in crisis. Every week there's a new drama, a new problem, a new emergency, and every week you drop everything to help. You're being generous, right? But what you're actually doing is enabling. You're teaching them that crisis gets them attention. You're rewarding dysfunction. Instead, controlled generosity would look like this. You help once or twice, but then you set a boundary. I care about you, but I can't keep being your crisis counselor. Maybe it's time to talk to a professional. You're still kind, but you're not available for unlimited emotional labor. That's the balance. This is deep thinking and overcoming cognitive bias. The bias is that more generosity equals more love. The truth is that strategic generosity builds healthier relationships. Most people confuse generosity with weakness. They think being selective with their help makes them selfish. But here's the truth. When you help everyone equally, you help no one effectively. Your resources are finite. Your time is limited. Your energy is not unlimited. When you spread yourself thin, trying to be everything to everyone, you become nothing to anyone. But when you're selective, when you focus your generosity on people and situations that matter, on people who reciprocate, on causes that align with your values, your impact multiplies. The contrast is clear. The person who gives to everyone is taken for granted. The person who gives selectively is appreciated. One is seen as a doormat. The other is seen as someone whose help is a privilege. Even though both might be equally generous in terms of total output, the perception is completely different. This is the psychology behind decision-making. You're deciding who deserves your resources based on strategy, not emotion. What happens when you master controlled generosity? People stop taking you for granted. They start earning your help. They reciprocate more because they know your generosity isn't automatic. You stop attracting users and start attracting genuine relationships. You have more energy because you're not drained by one-sided dynamics. And paradoxically, people respect you more. Because when everyone can have your help, nobody values it. But when your help has to be earned, it becomes valuable. But never be so controlled that you seem cold or calculating to those who genuinely deserve your generosity. This doesn't mean keep a spreadsheet of who owes you what. It means understand the difference between reciprocal relationships and exploitative ones. Give abundantly to the former. Set boundaries with the latter. Use this law to protect yourself from being used while still being a force for good in the world. The key principle is this: generosity without strategy creates dependence. Generosity with strategy creates respect. When you control how, when, and to whom you give, you transform from someone who's taken for granted into someone whose support is valued. Remember, the goal isn't to become stingy. The goal is to make your generosity mean something by ensuring it's directed at people and purposes worthy of it. Silent observation is the practice of talking less and watching more. It's about understanding that every word you speak is information you give away, and every moment you listen is intelligence you gather. Most people are desperate to fill silence with sound. They talk to prove they're smart, to get validation, to be heard. But the truly powerful understand that silence is the highest form of strategic behavior. While everyone else is revealing themselves, you're learning. While they're showing their cards, you're reading the table. Machiavelli once said, "The first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him." Here's what happens in most conversations. People can't help themselves. Someone asks a question and they don't just answer it, they elaborate unnecessarily. Someone shares a story and they immediately jump in with their own. Someone reveals a weakness and they match it with their own confession to build rapport. They think this is social bonding. They think talking equals connecting. But what they're actually doing is giving away leverage. Every time you speak, you're creating data points about yourself, your fears, your desires, your triggers, your patterns. Silent observers collect this data while revealing nothing in return. Think about a negotiation you've been part of. Could be salary, could be a business deal, could even be deciding where to eat with friends. The person who talks more usually loses. They reveal their bottom line. They show their desperation. They talk themselves out of better terms because they're uncomfortable with silence. The person who stays quiet, who asks questions instead of making statements, who listens more than they speak, walks away with the better deal. They knew what the other person wanted, feared, and needed. The other person knew almost nothing. That information asymmetry is power. This is the Machiavellian mindset in pure form. Intelligence gathering through strategic silence. Let's apply this to a workplace scenario. You're in a team meeting discussing a new initiative. Most people are eager to contribute. They want to look engaged, intelligent, valuable. So they talk. They offer opinions. They make suggestions. They show their hand completely. Instead, you could sit back. Listen to everyone else first. Notice who agrees with whom. Notice who has hidden agendas. Notice who's actually informed versus who's just performing. Then, when you do speak, you speak last. You speak with full knowledge of the room's dynamics. Your single contribution carries more weight than all their combined chatter because you've waited, observed, and strategized. That's power dynamics and psychological influence. The last word often becomes the final word. The deeper application connects to shadow work and self-awareness. Most people talk excessively because they're uncomfortable with themselves. Silence forces you to be with your own thoughts, and for many people, that's terrifying. Their internal dialogue is critical, anxious, chaotic, so they talk to escape it. They fill the void with noise. But when you practice silent observation, you're forced to confront your own mind. You become comfortable in the silence. You develop internal stability. That internal work translates to external power because you're no longer desperate for external stimulation or validation. This is rewiring your mind for clarity and growth. You're training yourself to be comfortable with less, which makes you powerful in more. Here's a personal relationship example. Someone is venting to you about their problems. The average person jumps in with advice, with their own stories, with immediate reactions. They think they're being helpful. Instead, you could just listen. Let them talk. Ask clarifying questions. How did that make you feel? What are you thinking of doing? Notice what happens. They talk themselves through the problem. They reveal way more than they intended. You learn about their decision-making process, their emotional patterns, their priorities. And at the end, they thank you for being such a good listener, such a helpful friend. You said almost nothing. You just created space. That's the power of silence. This is deep thinking and overcoming cognitive bias. The bias is that helping requires talking. The truth is that listening is often more powerful than speaking. Most people are so busy thinking about what they're going to say next that they don't actually listen to what's being said. They're waiting for their turn to talk rather than absorbing information. This makes them terrible strategists because they're operating on assumptions rather than intelligence. Silent observers don't have this problem. They're actually paying attention. They're reading body language. They're noticing tone shifts. They're catching the things left unsaid. While everyone else is performing, they're analyzing. The contrast is everywhere. The loudest person in the room is rarely the most dangerous. They're revealing everything about themselves with every word. The quiet person in the corner. That's the one you should watch, because they're watching everyone else. They're learning. They're building a map of everyone's weaknesses, desires, and patterns. And when they finally do act, they act with precision because they have information everyone else gave away freely. What happens when you master silent observation? You become unreadable. People can't figure you out because you're not constantly broadcasting who you are. You become strategic because you're making decisions based on real intelligence, not assumptions. You become respected because your words, when you do speak, carry weight. People lean in when you talk because it's rare. This is the psychology behind decision-making. You're making better decisions because you have better information, gathered through disciplined observation. But never be so silent that you seem disengaged or hostile. This doesn't mean never speak. It means speak intentionally. Contribute when you have something valuable to say. Ask strategic questions that make others reveal more. Use silence as a tool, not a shield. The goal is to shift your ratio from talking 70% of the time to listening 70% of the time. The key principle is this: information flows from the talker to the listener. The person talking is losing. The person listening is winning. When you embrace silence and observation, you're playing a different game than everyone else. They're competing to be heard. You're collecting intelligence. Remember, the goal isn't to become mute. The goal is to understand that words are expensive and silence is free, yet silence often buys you more than words ever could. Adaptive identity is the ability to read any environment and adjust your presentation accordingly without losing your core self. It's about understanding that different contexts require different versions of you. You're not being fake, you're being flexible. The same way you wouldn't wear a tuxedo to a beach or swim trunks to a funeral, you shouldn't bring the same energy, language, and behavior to every situation. The people who thrive in multiple worlds are the ones who can adapt. The people who insist on being authentically themselves in all contexts usually fail in most. Machiavelli once said, "A prince must imitate the fox and the lion, for the lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. One must therefore be a fox to recognize traps and a lion to frighten wolves." Here's what happens to most people. They develop one version of themselves and think that's being authentic. They talk the same way everywhere. They present the same personality in all contexts. They pride themselves on not changing for anyone, and then they wonder why they don't fit in certain rooms, why opportunities pass them by, why they struggle to connect with different types of people. The truth: rigid people break, adaptive people bend and survive. This is truth, identity, and personal transformation at its core. Your authentic self is not one fixed thing. It's a range. And smart people access different parts of that range depending on what the situation requires. Think about someone who's successful across multiple domains. Maybe they're great at work, great with friends, great with family, great in social settings. Notice how they shift. At work, they're professional, articulate, strategic. With friends, they're relaxed, funny, open. With family, they're warm, patient, protective. In social settings, they read the room and adjust. They're not being fake in any of these contexts. They're emphasizing different aspects of who they are based on what's needed. That's adaptive identity. They understand that being the same person in all contexts is actually limiting yourself, not being authentic. Let's apply this to a real scenario. You're in a job interview. The interviewer is formal, buttoned up, traditional. Most people would either match that energy exactly, coming across as robotic, or they'd insist on being themselves, even if their natural style is casual and informal. Both approaches fail. Instead, you could adapt. You maintain professionalism and respect for their formality, but you also inject warmth and personality in calibrated doses. You're reading their responses in real time and adjusting. They smile at a comment. You know you can be slightly more relaxed. They seem confused. You clarify and tighten your communication. This is the psychology behind decision-making and social intelligence. You're making micro-decisions constantly about how to present yourself based on feedback. The deeper layer here connects to subconscious programming and cognitive flexibility. Most people are stuck in one mode because that's what feels safe. It's what they know. Changing feels like lying to them, but that rigidity comes from fear, not authenticity. It comes from an underdeveloped sense of self that can't handle complexity. Shadow work reveals this. When you're truly secure in who you are, you can play different roles without losing yourself. You understand that you contain multitudes: the professional you, the playful you, the serious you, the vulnerable you. They're all real. Adaptive identity is about knowing which version serves you best in each context. Here's what this looks like in personal growth and transformation. You're working on yourself, developing new skills, new perspectives, new ways of being. But you're also hanging around old friends who knew you when you were different. Most people face a choice: abandon the old friends or hide their growth. Both are losses. Instead, you could adapt. With new contacts, you present the evolved version of yourself. With old friends, you honor the history and connection while still being who you become. You're not pretending you haven't grown, you're just not forcing your transformation down their throats. You meet people where they are, while staying true to where you are. That's sophisticated identity management. The contrast is brutal. The person who refuses to adapt comes across as socially inept, rigid, unaware. They give the same speech about their political views at a dinner party that they do at a protest. They use the same slang with their grandmother that they use with their friends. They're being real, but they're actually being inflexible. The person who adapts thrives everywhere. They can code switch between corporate boardrooms and street conversations. They can navigate academic settings and creative spaces. They make everyone feel comfortable because they're mirroring the energy appropriately. This is power dynamics and psychological influence mastered. You're influencing how people perceive you by adapting to their wavelength. Most people think there's virtue in being consistent. They think changing based on context is manipulation. But here's the truth: you already do this naturally in some areas. You don't talk to children the way you talk to adults. You don't communicate with your boss the way you communicate with your partner. That's adaptation. The law of adaptive identity just asks you to become conscious of it and strategic about it. This is rewiring your mind for clarity and growth. You're developing the cognitive flexibility to access different parts of yourself on command. What happens when you master adaptive identity? You become effective in any environment. You can walk into a room full of strangers, and within minutes you're matching their energy appropriately. You can shift between high society and working class environments without seeming fake in either. You become that rare person who everyone feels comfortable around because you're speaking their language, literally and figuratively. This creates opportunities. People who only thrive in their comfort zone have limited reach. People who thrive everywhere have unlimited reach. Here's a professional example. You're pitching a business idea to two different investors. One is a creative type who values innovation and disruption. The other is a numbers person who values stability and proven models. Most people would prepare one pitch and deliver it the same way to both. That's a mistake. Instead, you could adapt. With the creative investor, you emphasize the revolutionary aspect, the disruption, the vision. With the numbers investor, you emphasize the market data, the proven revenue model, the risk mitigation. Same business, different emphasis, both authentic. You're not lying to either one. You're adapting your message to resonate with their values. That's strategic identity management. This is deep thinking and overcoming cognitive bias. The bias is that one message fits all. The truth is that effective communication requires adaptation. But here's the critical warning. Never adapt so much that you lose your core. There's a difference between flexibility and shapelessness. You're not becoming whoever people want you to be. You're emphasizing the aspects of yourself that resonate best with each situation while maintaining your values, your boundaries, your non-negotiables. The goal is adaptation, not abandonment of self. If you're religious, you don't become atheist to fit in with atheists. You might just not lead with religion in that context. If you're introverted, you don't pretend to be extroverted constantly. You might just turn up your social energy when necessary and retreat to recharge after. The key principle is this: The chameleon survives where the peacock dies. When you can adapt, you can navigate any environment. When you insist on being the same in all contexts, you limit yourself to the contexts that accept that one version of you. Adaptive identity multiplies your effectiveness by giving you access to more rooms, more opportunities, more connections. Remember, the goal isn't to be fake. The goal is to be strategically genuine. Present the version of yourself that serves the moment while never betraying the core of who you are. When you master this, you become dangerous because you can operate anywhere. Outcome over morality is perhaps the most controversial law because it challenges the comfortable lie that good intentions matter more than results. This law states that history judges you by what you accomplished, not how you felt about it. That sometimes doing what's necessary means doing what's uncomfortable. That the world doesn't reward the person with the purest heart. It rewards the person who gets results. This doesn't mean abandon all ethics. It means understand that moral posturing without effective action is worthless, and sometimes the moral choice is the one that actually works, not the one that feels noble, Machiavelli once said. It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. Here's what happens to most people. They prioritize looking good over being effective. They make decisions based on how those decisions will make them appear to others, rather than what those decisions will actually accomplish. They're more concerned with their moral image than their real-world impact. So they take the path that lets them feel good about themselves, even when that path leads nowhere. They choose principles over results, and then they wonder why they keep losing, while people with fewer scruples keep winning. This is the harsh truth about power dynamics and psychological influence. The world is not run by the most moral people. It's run by the most effective people. Think about a situation where you had to choose between being liked and being respected. Maybe you were managing a team and someone wasn't performing. The moral, comfortable choice is to be nice, give more chances, avoid confrontation. That feels good. That makes you look compassionate. But what does it accomplish? The team suffers. Standards drop. Resentment builds from people who are performing. The outcome is negative, even though your intention was positive. The outcome-focused choice would be to address the issue directly, set clear expectations, and if necessary, let that person go. It feels harsh. It might make you look like the bad guy temporarily. But the outcome is better for everyone. That's the law. Results matter more than comfort. Let's apply this to personal life. You have a friend who's self-destructive. They keep making the same mistakes, and they keep coming to you for support. The moral instinct is to keep supporting them unconditionally because that's what a good friend does. You listen, you comfort, you enable. But what's the outcome? They don't change. They stay stuck. Your support, as well-intentioned as it is actually preventing their growth because you're cushioning every fall. The outcome-focused approach would be tough love, setting boundaries, telling them hard truths they don't want to hear, maybe even walking away until they're ready to change. That feels mean. That feels like abandonment. But if the outcome is that they finally hit bottom and get help, then the mean choice was actually the moral one. This is deep thinking and overcoming cognitive bias. The bias is that kindness equals support. The truth is that sometimes the kindest thing is the hardest thing. The deeper layer here connects to identity and personal transformation. Most people build their identity around being good. They need to see themselves as moral, ethical, kind. That need makes them weak because they'll sacrifice effectiveness to maintain that self-image. Shadow work forces you to confront this. What if being effective sometimes means doing things that don't feel good? What if the right choice is the one that makes you look bad? Can you handle that? Can you prioritize the outcome over your need to be seen as good? That's where real power lives. This is rewiring your mind for clarity and growth. You're reprogramming yourself to value results over appearances, effectiveness over comfort. Here's a business example. You're running a company, and you have to make layoffs to keep the business alive. The morally comfortable choice is to avoid layoffs, to try to keep everyone employed because firing people feels wrong. But if the outcome of that choice is the entire company goes under and everyone loses their job, was it actually the moral choice? The outcome-focused decision is to make the hard cuts, take the criticism, be the villain, but save the company and the remaining jobs. Machiavelli understood this. Leaders who prioritize being loved over being effective lose everything. Leaders who prioritize outcomes over comfort make the hard choices and survive. This is the psychology behind decision-making at the highest levels. Most people hide behind morality when they're actually just avoiding discomfort. They say, "I couldn't do that. It wouldn't be right," when what they really mean is, "I couldn't do that. It would make me uncomfortable." They confuse their emotional comfort with moral superiority. But here's the truth. Inaction can be more immoral than uncomfortable action. Letting a bad situation continue because you don't want to be the one to end. It isn't noble. It's cowardice disguised as kindness. The person who actually does something, even if it's harsh, even if it's unpopular, is often more moral than the person who does nothing and feels good about it. The contrast is everywhere. The manager who can't fire anyone becomes the manager who watches their entire team suffer under incompetence. The parent who can't discipline becomes the parent who raises entitled, unprepared children. The friend who can't set boundaries becomes the friend who enables destruction. They all get to feel good about being nice. But their outcomes are terrible. Meanwhile, the manager who makes tough calls builds great teams. The parent who disciplines raises capable adults. The friend who sets boundaries actually helps. They might not feel as good in the moment, but their results speak louder than their feelings. What happens when you master outcome over morality? You stop making excuses. You stop hiding behind principles when you're actually just scared of consequences. You make decisions based on what will actually work, not what will make you look good or feel comfortable. You become effective. And effectiveness is its own morality. This is truth and identity integration. The truth is that good intentions without good outcomes are worthless. Your identity shifts from person with good intentions to person who gets results. Here's a political example without taking sides. Leaders who only make popular decisions lose wars, economies collapse, and nations fail. Leaders who make necessary decisions, even unpopular ones, survive crises. The leader who tells people what they want to hear gets elected. The leader who does what needs to be done gets results. Those are often different people. History remembers the ones who got results, not the ones who had the purest principles. That's harsh, but it's true. This is power dynamics stripped to its core. Power goes to those who accomplish, not to those who perform moral superiority. But here's the essential boundary. This doesn't mean do anything for any outcome. There are still lines. You don't achieve business success through fraud. You don't build relationships through abuse. You don't win by destroying everything around you. The law is about prioritizing effective action over comfortable inaction, not about abandoning all ethics for any win. There's a difference between making hard choices that serve the greater good and making evil choices that serve yourself. The former is Machiavellian wisdom. The latter is just being a psychopath. The key principle is this: be judged by your results, not your intentions. The world doesn't care how you felt about your choices. It cares what happened because of them. When you embrace outcome over morality, you stop performing goodness and start creating it through effective action. You become someone who actually changes things rather than someone who just talks about changing things. Remember, the goal isn't to become amoral. The goal is to understand that morality without effectiveness is just vanity. When you prioritize outcomes while maintaining ethical boundaries, you become truly powerful because you're actually accomplishing good instead of just feeling good. You've just absorbed 8 laws that most people will go their entire lives without understanding. But here's the brutal truth. Knowledge without application is completely worthless. You can memorize every word of this, quote Machiavelli, at dinner parties, and still lose every game being played around you. Why? Because knowing and doing are separated by an ocean of excuses. Here's your assignment. Pick one law, just one. Not all, 8 one. Maybe it's strategic absence because you've been too available and people take you for granted. Maybe it's emotional detachment because you react too quickly and regret it later. Maybe it's silent observation because you talk too much and reveal too much. Pick the one that cuts deepest. The one that made you uncomfortable. That's the one you need. Practice it for 7 days. 7 days of intentional application. Don't try to master all 8 at once. That's how you master none. Let me remind you of something crucial. These laws exist, whether you use them or not. Right now, someone in your life is already playing by these rules. Your boss, your competitor, maybe even your friend. They're using absence to make you chase. They're staying quiet while you reveal everything. They're detached while you're emotional. The game is happening. The only question is whether you're a player or a piece. And I'm not telling you this to make you paranoid. I'm telling you this to make you prepared. Use these insights to protect yourself first. Not to harm others. Not to manipulate for sport. But to build a life where you're not constantly surprised by betrayal, confusion, or loss. The world needs people who understand power and choose to use it responsibly. People who see the darkness but don't become it. People who master the game but don't let the game master them. There are 2 types of people walking this earth: the manipulator and the unmanipulatable. The manipulator uses these laws to control, to scheme, to take from others. They're everywhere and they're exhausting. But the unmanipulatable, they use these laws to gain power over themselves, to protect their energy, to command respect without demanding it, to build empires without destroying souls, not to gain power over others, but to gain power over yourself. That's the difference. That's the line. Which kind of person do you choose to be? If this video gave you even one insight that shifted how you see the world, hit that like button. It tells me you're serious about this path. Subscribe and turn on notifications because we're going deeper into Machiavellian strategy, dark psychology, and the hidden mechanisms of power. And drop a comment answering this question: which of these 8 laws hit you the hardest? Which one are you committing to master first? I read every single comment, and I want to know where you're starting. Master the laws, or be ruled by those who already have. Stay strategic. Stay ethical. Stay powerful.